Hey, bro, can I ask you a question? Um, it's not a question about your job. It's not a question about your marriage. It's not about your finances. I want to ask you a question God asked the very first man. Who told you that? Who told you that you weren't good enough? Who told you that you weren't who told you that you weren't smart enough, or who told you that you weren't leadership material? Who told you that God couldn't use somebody like you? Because somewhere along the way, a lot of men stop believing what God said about them, and they start believing what other people are telling them about them. And after you repeat a lie long enough, it eventually starts sounding like your own voice. So today I'm going to show you where those lies come from, how they begin shaping your identity, and how God replaced them with truth. Because you don't live only from what is true, you live from what you believe is true. And if the wrong belief is shaping your identity, it will eventually shape the direction of your entire life. And you know what, bro? I had seasons where I questioned myself too. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. I'm going to work. I'm paying the bills. I'm showing up on the regular. I'm handling every responsibility that comes my way. But something inside of me still felt off. I I wasn't asking myself, can I work harder? I was I was asking myself, why does something still feels like it's missing? And looking back, I realized I just wasn't only struggling with direction. I was struggling with what I believe about myself. And maybe you experienced that too. Maybe you sat in the driveway after work. Uh, the engine is off, the keys are still in your hand, but you don't get out. You don't get out the car right away. Not because you're only tired from the job, but you're tired from carrying everything. You're trying to leave one version of yourself inside the car before you walk inside and become the husband, the father, the provider, the strong one again. And maybe you looked in the mirror and instead of seeing the man God created you to be, all you see is your mistakes, your failures, your regrets. Or maybe you watch another man succeed and quietly ask yourself, why not me? I mean, what is wrong with me? Bro, more men are wrestling with this than they want to admit. And most people would say the problem is confidence. And I don't believe the problem is confidence is a deeper issue. I believe that the deeper issue is your identity. Because when you believe you're not enough, you start to hesitate. When you believe that you're always failing, you stop trying. When you believe that you never change, you start accepting things God never told you to accept. And your life eventually follows the story you believe about yourself. And that is why I always say that the most important question a man can answer is not what should I do with my life. The first question is, who am I? Because when you get that question wrong, every other answer starts leaning into the wrong direction. Why did God create me? What did he create me for? What are my responsibilities as a man? All of these questions are built on identity. If the foundation is wrong, then everything else built on top of it will eventually become unstable. You don't live only from what is true. You live from what you have believed is true. You know what? Let's go back in my favorite book to the beginning. Let's start with Genesis chapter 3. Adam and Eve had disobeyed God. Afterwards, Adam became afraid. He became ashamed. He hid from God. And then God asked Adam a question. And it's not because God didn't know the answer. God asked the question because Adam needed to confront what had changed inside of him. Genesis 3:11 says, who told you you were naked? Think about that. God didn't ask Adam, why are you naked? He asked him, why are you afraid? He asked, who told you that? So in other words, Adam, where did this new way of seeing yourself come from? And before the fall, Adam was not hiding. He was not ashamed. He was not questioning whether he belonged in God's presence. But after he agreed with the serpent's lie, his view of himself completely changed. And once his view of himself changed, then his behavior changed. That's why he hid. This is what lies do. A lie enters as a thought, then you agree with it. Your agreement becomes a belief. Belief begins shaping your identity. Identity eventually shapes your behavior. So there's a lie, there's an agreement, there's a belief, there's identity, and there's behavior. And you don't live only from what is true. You live from what you have believed is true. And maybe somebody spoke something over you years ago. Maybe your father called you weak. Maybe somebody told you that you would never amount to anything. Maybe a teacher made you feel like you weren't intelligent. Maybe a coach made you believe that you didn't have what it took. Maybe a relationship ended and you decided nobody's ever going to truly love me. Maybe you felt this something once and turn one failure into your entire identity. But listen to me. A failure isn't something you experience. It's not what you are. You have failed. That doesn't mean that you're a failure. You have made mistakes. That doesn't mean that you are a mistake. You may have gone through a broken season, but that doesn't mean that you're permanently broken. The problem is that after a label is spoken over a man, he often becomes the one who keeps repeating it to himself. The person who spoke it may not even be in the room with you anymore, but the voice remains. The enemy may not have repeat the lie anymore because you've learned how to repeat it to yourself. That's why a lie repeat long enough eventually sounds like your own voice. You know, the enemy has been attacking identity from the very beginning. In Genesis, the serpent convinced Adam and Eve that they were missing something. He told them that they could become like God. But Genesis 1 already said that they were created in God's image. Do you see the strategy? The enemy tried to make them strive for something God has already given them. He still uses the same strategy today. He tries to make you prove your worth, to earn your identity, performance for acceptance, comparing yourself with everybody else. And if you don't know who you are, the world will gladly give you a name. Your past will name you. Your failures will name you. Your culture will name you. Your wounds will name you. That's why I say, know yourself or the world will name you. But the world did not create you. Your failures did not create you. Your past did not create you. God created you. Therefore, God has the authority to define you. Here's another question. Have you ever noticed that God almost never begins with a man's ability? He begins with identity and he begins with presence. Gideon said, my clan is the weakest and I am the least in my family. But God said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Yeah. Gideon saw weakness, but God spoke identity. Moses asks, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? God didn't give Moses a motivational speech. God said, I will be with you. Moses was focused on his limitation. God pointed him towards his presence. And before Jesus preached one more sermon, before he healed one person, before he performed one miracle, God declared, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. Identity before assignment. God almost never starts with a man's self-confidence. He starts with his presence. When an assignment comes before identity, your work becomes your worth. When success, you become prideful. When you fail, you collapse. But when identity comes first, your work becomes an expression of who you are in God. You don't work to become accepted. You work because you are accepted. You don't obey to earn identity. You obey because God already told you who you are. So how do you begin breaking agreement with those lies? First, identify the lie. Stop saying, this is just who I am. Ask, who told you that? Second, Compare the thought with scripture. Not every thought that enters your mind deserves a seat in your heart. Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. 2 Corinthians 10 tells us to take our thoughts captive. That means you do not have to accept every thought as a truth. And third, replace the lie with what God actually said. You don't overcome counterfeit identity by studying every possible lie. You learn the truth so well that the counterfeit becomes obvious. And fourth, begin walking in truth before emotions catch up. You may not feel confident yet. Obey anyway. You may not feel ready. Take the next faithful step anyway. Confidence often grows after obedience, not before it. So, bro, if this conversations are helping you yourself, the way you see God, so I need you to subscribe and become a part of the journey, because here we're learning how to answer 4 life-changing questions of who am I? Why did God create me? What did he create me for? And what are my responsibilities as a man? We're not chasing temporary motivation. We're building identity, purpose, direction, responsibly on the foundation of God's word. And if that's the man that you want to become, I need you to join me. So let me leave you with the same question God asked Adam. Who told you that? Who told you weren't enough? Who told you your past was stronger than God's purpose? Who told you you were too broken? Who told you it was too late? Who told you God couldn't use somebody like you? Because if God never said it, why are you still believing it? Maybe you have been carrying a name God never gave you. Maybe you have been measuring yourself by a standard God never created. Maybe today is not about trying harder. Maybe today is about believing differently. Because the moment you begin believing what God says about you, you can begin walking as a man he created you to be. Remember, you don't live only from what is true. You live from what you have believed is true. So this week, when the lie shows up, don't only ask, is this how I feel? Ask, did God say this about me? Let God's voice become louder than your past, louder than your failures, louder than culture, louder than every label that you have carried. I'm Darren McCoy, the Purpose Navigator, and what I do, I help men discover who they are, why God created them, what they are created for, and their responsibilities as a man. And remember, you were created by God for God's purpose. Now it's time for you to discover it and for you to walk in it.